The new moon in Aries occurred last night for me on March the 31st at 11:24 p.m. And as you know, I do my new moon videos after the new moon, but rarely do I do it this late in the process. So I apologize for that. It's a combination really of the fact that it happened at 11:34 p.m. at night. And so by the time the day when it came about and started to get rolling, etc., etc., etc. So here we are. One of three videos that I will be doing over the course of this week. The first one, new moon in Aries, the primary transit that this new moon makes. In fact, the only one we're going to talk about is the fact that it's conjunct Chiron. There are also four other transits that are encoded into this new moon. One is that tomorrow, Mercury conjuncts the Sun. It's a new moon in Aries. That means the Sun and the Moon are in Aries. Mercury is also in Aries, and tomorrow Mercury and the Sun meet up. That's transit number one. Transit number two is Mars conjuncting Saturn, and that happens on April the 4th, I believe. So coming up is the second. So April the 3rd, Mercury conjuncts Saturn as the Sun. April the 4th, Mars conjuncts Saturn. April the 12th, Jupiter conjuncts Neptune in Pisces. And when I was researching this, I got an April 11th date, but I don't think that that is accurate. I think that it depends on how you calculate the North Node. But irrespective, Saturn squares the nodes, whether you calculate it as the North Node or the True Node. And I will let astrology experts kind of split hairs on that one. In the middle of April, Saturn squares the nodes. So once again, new moon in Aries conjunct Chiron, with four transits being encoded over the next 4 weeks. Mercury conjunct Saturn. Mercury conjunct the Sun. Mercury conjunct the Sun. Mars conjunct Saturn. Jupiter conjunct Neptune. And Saturn squaring the North Node. And specifically, the new moon is in Aries conjunct Chiron in Aries. Mercury and the Sun conjunct in Aries tomorrow. Mars and Saturn conjunct in Aquarius on April the 4th. Saturn in Aquarius squares the nodes, the North Node for all intents and purposes in Taurus in the middle of the month. And Jupiter and Neptune conjunct in Pisces on April the 12th. Now, whatever just happened is very indicative of Mercury being so close to the Sun, kind of a Mercury retrogradeness, Mercury being so close to the Sun and Mercury being combust. But let's start to break this energy down. Number one, April is a month when all the planets continue to move forward, and some are moving forward quite fast. And so April is a month of forward movement. And it is likely that developments will continue. What is interesting is that these developments both have a direct relationship with the lunar eclipse in Taurus on November 19th of 2021, but also what we're feeling more, while those developments are rolling out, what we're starting to feel more and more is the upcoming lunar eclipse in Scorpio on May the 15th. So as I said, March the 15th to May the 15th, those energies are going to start to develop more. So you have a sense of forward movement, but you also have a sense increasingly of things that need to be released. And this is the first of the Scorpio eclipses. So there's going to be an intensification of these energies because we're really kind of going through them and setting the agenda for this Scorpio eclipses for the first time in 18, 19 years. So I don't, and the lunations in April and even May have an intensity to them. A new moon conjunct Chiron is no joke. The full moon square Pluto in the middle of the month in Libra has its own intensity. The new moon solar eclipse in Taurus on April the 30th, as far as I'm concerned, is a welcome eclipse insofar as it brings energies that we are meant to lean into back to the top of the agenda. bringing the new set of energies that came into play from September the 19th to November the 19th of last year back to the top of the priority list. So there's something nice about when the North Node eclipse, solar eclipse happens, it's nice to kind of be reoriented in the direction that we're meant to move towards, as opposed to dealing with what needs to be released, which is often complicated. And then when we are talking about a new moon conjunct Chiron, of course becomes complicated. And we talk about Mars conjuncting Saturn and Jupiter conjuncting Neptune and Saturn squaring the nodes. And, you know, insofar as this new moon is encoding energies that continue for the rest of April, April is a month of turmoil. And then, you know, April the 30th, we have one eclipse, and then May the 15th, we have another eclipse. So that time period between the two is also likely to be quite intense. So between now and May the 15th, whatever it is that needs to be released, there's a lot happening. There really is a churn between what needs to be released to allow us to lean into these Taurian energies. And we're not really necessarily going to be feeling, even though the developments are happening behind the scenes to support the Taurus eclipse, it's not directly in the Taurus part of the chart where we're feeling things right now. That will change soon enough. Mercury is going to move into Taurus. It's going to be the first of the planets, the personal planets, Mercury, the Sun, Venus, to move into Taurus in a few days' time. And so that conversation related to the eclipse will start happening, thankfully, soon. Now, when we're talking a new moon conjunct Chiron, we're talking a new moon of healing, but any healing, and particularly when we're talking about Chiron, can only happen when we're conscious of whatever it is that needs to be healed. Do you know, whenever it is that you have like a pimple or a zit on your face or somewhere, isn't it amazing that your hand finds it? So even before you feel something, very often you'll have something unusual going on with your body and your hand will be led to it. I find it kind of fascinating, this kind of knowing that the body has to kind of bring something to our mercurial attention. So the mind, the conscious mind, isn't necessarily running the show. Something else is running the show. Well, something else probably should be running the show, but it's the conscious mind that tries to run the show. But the awareness of wherever it is that the problem lies, or the wound lies, or the hurt lies, always is likely to bring a sense of urgency towards healing it. We're likely to experience pain or discomfort associated with the wound, or whatever it is that needs to be healed, and anxiety around the fact that it's there. So even though it is a new moon of healing, it's very possible as we go into it, and especially over the next week or two, we might be very, very conscious of, and I am talking about serious emotional wounds and baggage that need to be, and you'll know, if you know where Aries sits in your chart and what house it occupies and what that house stands for, then you'll really know which wound or what it is that is here to be healed. But you're not going to be able to start the healing process without being able to be conscious of the feeling associated with this wound and a period of examination and communication related to this wound. Then you will be able to determine what to do about it and how to heal from it. I came across this quote today by Marianne Williamson, I think, around, and I'm paraphrasing, around how you can't really heal the past by living in the past. You can only really heal the past by living fully in the present. And that quote I felt was very resonant to this new moon. I was kind of surprised and delighted to find it. But in order to get to fully living in the present, you do have to, there's a certain amount of work that is involved in that. You know, what is it that is calling your attention? What is it that needs to be dealt with? What does dealing with it mean to you? And because we're so much more in the throes of the eclipse of release than we are in the eclipse of leaning into. I'm talking about the Scorpio eclipse on May the 15th that is accelerating. It's very likely that there's a feeling again of the slate needing to be cleared and things needing to be healed or sorted out in order to be able to avail of the new set of energies that are related to the energies that came up between September 19th and November 19th, 2021, that are going to make their presence felt again around April the 30th, thankfully, and are going to increase in intensity as we head to June the 30th. So while it is a new moon of healing, I would say that it is also a new moon. There's no way to gild the lily on this or sugarcoat this. It is also a new moon of dealing with a certain amount of pain and what is hurting. And it could be something bodily, but with Chiron, we're talking about spiritual lessons. We're talking about sort of big soul wounds. Okay? So how's that to start this new moon in Aries video? The sun is in Aries. In order to have a new moon in Aries, the sun and the moon both have to be in Aries, a sign that it rules. So the new moon is ruled by the sun in its own sign, disposited by the sun. Great. The sun in Aries is the most. It's such a pure energy because it puts you directly in touch with your authentic self. You know, the sign of Aries, especially when you're dealing with someone who has a strong Aries configuration in that chart, it's the shortest distance between who they are and what they want to do of any of the other signs that you will encounter. You know, it's like, poof. With the sun in Aries, often that can give tremendous initiative. With the moon in Aries, it becomes a trickier placement because there can be a tendency to emotionally kind of run roughshod over anyone or anything that is in your way and just get irritated with any obstacle or anything that is perceived as something that needs to be repaired or fixed. So it's worth it to mention that the sun is happy in Aries, but the moon is not, and it's a new moon in Aries. So dissatisfaction, discomfort, when we're dealing with a new moon conjunct Chiron, we're dealing with issues related to healing, I'm prompted to remind you that we often ignore things until we can't. And this new moon, for some of us who have a higher pain threshold and who have a tendency to kind of grin and bear it, or have a tendency to keep going on with something over and over again, with the sun in Aries and the moon in Aries, it's a potent combination of emotional dissatisfaction and a desire to change and switch things around, coupled with the intrinsic, authentic energy to initiate change and take action as well. And then when you couple it with Chiron, there's no question that over the next 4 weeks, I would say even 6 weeks if you factor the sign of Scorpio in, both Aries and Scorpio are ruled by Mars. So the pursuit of goals, but conflict and the laying down of boundaries is quite important. And I made a mistake. The sun is exalted in Aries, but Mars rules Aries, and Mars is in Aquarius. And we are back with the Saturn-Uranus square again. You know, when I was thinking about this video, I thought, oh, isn't it great, even the last lunation, we were finally out of some sort of lunation that isn't ruled by Saturn and Aquarius, and with Venus in the mix. And here we are. We haven't escaped it. And that makes a lot more sense to me when I think about the transits that I'm talking about. So, new moon conjunct Chiron, dissatisfaction with a wound, the healing of which is unlikely to occur without really experiencing the pain and discomfort first. Initiative, emotional, and on an authentic soul level to make the changes that are needed. And as we expand this to talk about the transits that are occurring at this time, the first of which is that Mercury conjuncts the Sun tomorrow, it's very likely that some of this healing is going to be based in conversation and mercurial activity, contracts, agreements, transactions, but most importantly, communications. So things can fly around in writing, they can be verbally expressed, clarification can be sought, and lines might be drawn, often in using communication or technology. And in some cases, as I said, this could result in contractual stuff, for legal stuff, for picking up the phone, or Mercury-related stuff. With Mercury conjunct the Sun tomorrow, not only does the planet of communication, among other things, but especially communication and our cognition, get a reset with where we actually authentically are at this point in time, which is why so many mercurial things are harder to access right now, as is evidenced by this video, how much I'm having to pause and correct myself and re-say something or recorrect something or get the words out and all that kind of stuff. And you'll find that this is not just, it wouldn't surprise me at all if for the past 72 hours it's felt a little bit like Mercury's retrograde, what's going on, that kind of feeling, because Mercury is invisible because it is so close to the Sun. The Sun is completely blinding it, but the Sun is also imparting Mercury. They're also having this conjunction, this communication, this download. And so our communication and cognition mechanism, our mind, is getting fed information from what it is that our most authentic core, our soul knows, our subconscious knows. And then as it starts to clear the Sun, but even with this new moon, it's going to continue and communicate and cognate, if that's a word, based on these downloads that are occurring. Goodness, I can't wait for Mercury to be clear of the Sun. The other thing I want to say is that this Mercury-Sun conjunction could mean that a certain set of actions associated with the sign of Aquarius, here it is again, on January the 23rd of 2022, when a retrograde Mercury conjuncts the Sun, as it did on January 23rd, 2022, it starts a new Mercury cycle. And it could be that as we've headed to tomorrow, that a certain set of activity related to the sign of Aquarius and where it sits in your chart and the house it occupies and what that house stands for is now done. It's like the implementation of a project is done. And now, between tomorrow and the next time when Mercury goes retrograde, which I'm now feeling inclined to get that date for you, which I will in a second. Luckily, I have my laptop fired up, comparatively speaking. I do need to pull up some information. Forgive me, I don't always do this. Actually, I've never done this while I've been doing a video. Irrespective, I'll come back to it. Now we get to deal with the results of whatever we've implemented related to the sign of Aquarius. And the implementation I'm talking about is very likely going to be communication related. Have you signed a contract with someone? Have you communicated something with someone? So it's related to where Aquarius sits in your chart. It's results time, it's tweaking time, it's adjustment time. So it's not without action. It's just not quite so initiatory as the time period between the 23rd of January and tomorrow is going to be. And if you know where Aquarius sits in your chart, you'll have a clear sign of seeing what this Mercury cycle has been about. So with Mercury, it's conjuncting the Sun tomorrow. Whatever this new moon in Aries is bringing conjunct Chiron, related to whatever needs to be healed in the Aries part of your chart, is likely to have a communication pattern I'm summarizing as it goes along. And also whatever has been implemented in the Aquarius part of your chart, especially through communication, through technology, through agreements, is likely to have completed some sort of an initial initiation phase. And between now and Mercury goes retrograde on May the 10th. Between now and actually, it's going to be a little bit after that when Mercury and I think actually it's on the 21st. It's on May the 21st, actually, when a retrograde Mercury and the Sun are going to conjunct. So actually, no, it's when Mercury goes retrograde. See what's happening when Mercury's combust? Sorry about that. It's when Mercury goes retrograde. No. Yeah, okay. When Mercury goes retrograde, somewhere between May the 10th and May the 21st, is when it is May the 10th. Between now and May the 10th, whatever it is that you have initiated in the sign of Aquarius, you get to tweak results. You get to see how things are working. You get to adjust. Now, the next transit we want to talk about is Mars conjuncting Saturn on April the 4th. And on this, I'm going to do a separate video altogether. And this, frankly, is kind of a warlike energy. This is it can be, there's a foundation laying, and from an action, there's two parts to this. From an action-orientedness, again, in the sign of Aquarius and where Aquarius sits in your chart, it is combative. It is energetic. So whether you are laying a foundation, whether you are creating something permanent in this part of the chart, it's likely that it's going to come with some sort of assertive pursuit of goals or setting a foundation. And setting a foundation may also mean a certain amount of boundary setting with Mars conjuncting Saturn. I'm going to say more about this later, as I said. But again, with this new moon conjuncting Chiron and Mars and Saturn coming together, it's not the sweetest of energies, you know. And Mars is conjunct Saturn, and Mars is the dispositor of this chart. And Mars is the ruler of this chart, not the dispositor. And Saturn is one of the dispositors of the chart in a sign that it rules. Uranus is the other. Venus is also in Aquarius. So we have this conversation between Venus and Saturn and Uranus again. And the two signs that are involved are Aquarius and Taurus. Remember, all of last year was this square between Saturn and Uranus in Taurus. Saturn and Aquarius, Uranus and Taurus. And we talked about patterns and boundaries that need to be dealt with, and the slate that needs to be cleared, and not falling into the path of least resistance and behaviors and patterns that have been in place for the past 28 years in the part of your chart that Aquarius occupies, the house and what it stands for, in order to create the liberation in the Taurus part of your chart that Uranus is demanding and will create. And with the North Node and the eclipses in Taurus, that's even more pronounced now. And after April the 30th, we'll get another boost. So it's impossible to interpret this transit without looking at Mars conjunct Saturn in Aquarius with this reminder that a strong foundation needs to be built in the Aquarius part of your chart, and goals need to be pursued, but strong foundation means that boundaries also need to be set in place. And with the new moon conjuncting Chiron and communication playing a role, it wouldn't surprise me if there's a correlation between whatever these, for some of us, there will be a correlation between this wound and whatever lesson Saturn is trying to teach us in Saturn, and whatever you might feel energized to do in this part of the chart as you head towards April the 4th in an energetic, combative way. More on this in my next video. Jupiter and Neptune conjunct. My next video after that, I told you this is the first of 3 videos, in Pisces. Wherever there has been some shady business since 2014, 15, 16, gets another reset, gets a reset. The energy, it's like the Etch-a-Sketch gets cleared. It's the start of a 12-year cycle, some sort of a grand theft. It could be romantic. So if, for example, you're Aquarius rising and this is happening in the Pisces part of your chart, the second house, it could be an infusion of self-worth and self-esteem, either over something financial or over something sensual, for example. And you can use that wherever it is that you want to, wherever it is that Pisces sits in your chart. And finally, Saturn squares the nodes. And here we are again. Saturn is in Aquarius. The North Node is in Taurus. It's the same demand that Saturn is making from last year, which is in the Aquarius part of your chart. What are the lessons you need to learn? What are the lessons Saturn is trying to teach you? Where it is that you keep falling into the path of least resistance, where you have been going for the past 28 years, and what you need to stop in order to fulfill your highest potential, which is signified by, right now, where the sign of Taurus sits in your chart. a conjunction between two challenging planets, Mars and Saturn, the two malefics, a conjunction between two spiritual planets, Jupiter and Neptune, a conjunction in very real terms between the planet of communication and our subconscious, a new moon conjunct Chiron, the body that stands for deep-seated psychological and emotional wounding. April might well be the cruelest month. But it might be the month on which, if you don't do what needs to be done in order to heal and in order to move past things that are hurting or where there are energy leaks, you may not be able to fully avail of what the April 30th Taurus solar eclipse brings. The table is going to be set, and you are actually given a fair amount of planetary firepower to take care of what needs to be done. It's just not pain-free. But the purpose, what is the purpose of pain and discomfort? It is to propel us to make changes that are happier and more comfortable. Now, I'm going to leave it at that. What is it that is hurting you? And it's not small stuff. Deal with it. If you found this video useful, feel free to share it, comment on it, like it, subscribe to my YouTube channel, click on the bell icon next to the subscribe button. When it comes to these woundings, it could be in relationship to someone, archetypal, lovers, family, children. It's deeper. It's deep. But it can also mean things like whatever it is that has affected your sense of self-worth or self-esteem. If it happens in certain parts of your chart where that is relevant. So if you have a Pisces rising, it could have something to do with that, for example. If you're a Cancer rising, it might have something to do with that with regard to your career or your full potential of your sort of fame and what you want to achieve from a career perspective. Okay, I will leave it at that. Remember, the purpose of discomfort and pain is to heal and to move towards greater comfort and happiness. And happiness or contentment. I read this other quote which feels very relevant to what I'm going to share. I can't say I'm entirely clear how, but I'll say it. I read this somewhere where peace of mind is really an illusion because the mind can never be peaceful. So as you contemplate healing and comfort and happiness, where then do comfort and happiness sit? Now you're going to be dealing with realer stuff than that with a new moon. You know me, it got cut off. You're going to be dealing with bigger stuff that you're really, with Chiron, whatever the wounds are, it's not justified. It goes to the very core of you're going to be forced to contend with and deal with something that no matter what the externals are that created something, whether it is related to a relationship or an incident or a series of incidents, what you're really healing is something at the soul level, at the core level. So it is something that has really impacted you and hurt you, and it is something that you carry. And now, if you are someone who's reaching the age of 50 or thereabouts, or if you know your chart and you're experiencing a Chiron return, then that is going to be occurring in the sign of Aries for you, because that's likely where you're going to have Aries, possibly, very possibly. So then that sort of wounded, that carries even more weight. This new moon carries, I mean, this new moon could be very, very important to you. But yeah, I just wanted to make that clear. It's not, I mentioned relationships and I mentioned, this is bigger stuff than that. So, but, you know, everything is in the mix. To all the discomfort is there to force us to deal with this. And all the signs are pointing to, with no planets being in retrograde, to dealing with it. So go for it. And it's very likely, and I'll make this my final point. I mean, I would have been fine just leaving the video where it got cut off, but I wanted to make both these points. It sort of adds a lot of time to my video processing time, because editing these two videos together will take no time, but the whole processing process is just its own kind of beast. But it's funny, someone just texted me and said video today or tomorrow, which is very sweet, and you'll know who you are. And it's very likely that whatever it is that you're going to try and heal and sort out is going to have a communication component to it, with Mercury conjuncting the Sun tomorrow, and that conjunction being the closest conjunction that we're dealing with right now as far as this new moon is concerned, along with the conjunction to Chiron. Okay, I will really leave it at that. As I said, like, comment, share, subscribe, click on the bell icon. Until the next video, which is going to be about Mars conjunct Saturn in Aquarius.